Downtown Chicago was a blur of hurried footsteps, morning routines, and people too busy to look up from their phones. Among the rhythm of life, unnoticed by most, sat a woman near the edge of a popular cafe. Her figure was small, almost lost beneath the weight of an oversized coat. Her name was Elena Morales, and at only 28 years old, life had already drained her of the sparkle she once carried. A few years ago, Elena had been a promising literature graduate, known for her quick wit, love for classic novels, and dreams of becoming a published author. She grew up with humble beginnings, raised by a single mother who worked night shifts just to keep food on the table. When her mother died suddenly of heart failure, Elena's world fell apart. A toxic relationship followed, which left her emotionally and financially broken. She tried holding on to jobs, but without support, stability slipped further from her grasp. Her final eviction came on a rainy November night. Since then, the streets became her new reality. Each day, she sat with a cardboard sign beside her, not asking for much. Just trying to survive. She didn't beg. She didn't yell. She didn't chase anyone down. She simply sat and waited, for kindness, for a miracle, or maybe just for someone to look at her like she mattered. People walked past her like she was invisible. Some spared a coin. Most didn't even glance. Cold wind wrapped around her, stinging her fingers. Her stomach growled painfully. She had grown used to the ache, but not the loneliness. It was a bitter January morning when something unexpected happened. A man stepped out of the cafe behind her. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee. Unlike others, he stopped in front of her. For a moment, Elena didn't react. She was used to being overlooked, not addressed. "Hey," the man said, his voice kind. Elena slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met his, gentle, brown, and full of genuine warmth. "I brought this for you," he said, holding out one of the cups. Elena stared at it like it was gold. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. The warmth of the paper cup immediately seeped into her frozen skin. "Thank you," she whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. "I'm David," he said. "Mind if I sit here for a minute?" She nodded slowly. He sat beside her on the cold bench. They didn't talk for a while. He didn't ask about her situation. He didn't offer empty pity. He just sat and drank his coffee beside her, like 2 friends enjoying a quiet morning. That morning became the beginning of something neither of them could have expected. David returned the next day at the same time, with 2 coffees again. This time, he brought a small paper bag with a croissant. "I thought you might like something to eat," he said, smiling. Elena hesitated, then accepted it gratefully. The buttery pastry tasted like heaven. She hadn't had anything fresh in days. "What's your name?" David asked. "Elena," she said, shyly. "That's a beautiful name," he replied. And just like that, they fell into a simple rhythm. Each morning, for the next several weeks, David brought her coffee, a pastry, and 20 minutes of conversation. They talked about everything: books, funny things that happened during his workday, random thoughts about life. David worked as a web developer from home. He had no wife, no children, and a golden retriever named Max. He lived a quiet life but carried a loud heart. And Elena? She started to laugh again. That quiet, hesitant laughter turned into genuine joy over time. One morning, David brought something different, a small, brand-new notebook and a pen. "You told me you used to write," he said. "Thought maybe you'd like to start again." Elena looked at the notebook as if it were a sacred gift. Her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't held a pen in years, not for herself. That night, sitting near the back wall of a shelter where she could find occasional space, she wrote. Her words spilled out like they had been waiting in silence for someone to give them permission. The next morning, she read a short piece to David. It was a story titled "The Girl Who Forgot She Had Wings." It was about a young girl who lost her voice but eventually learned that silence didn't mean invisibility. David was stunned. "Elena, this is powerful." She smiled faintly. "I thought maybe I lost it." "You didn't," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you." Elena continued writing. Each day, she read a new story or poem to David. She began to feel alive again, reconnected to her inner world. David encouraged her to submit her work to blogs and local writing contests. At first, she refused. "No one wants to read anything written by a homeless girl," she said. David gently corrected her. "They want to read something written by someone real. Someone who's lived. And you've lived more than most." One day, he handed her a flyer for a local storytelling night at the public library. "Come share your writing," he suggested. Elena's heart raced. "I can't. I have nothing to wear. I'll embarrass myself." "I found something," he said, pulling out a clean, second-hand sweater and a warm jacket. "You don't have to impress anyone. Just be you." With shaky hands and a nervous heart, Elena stood on stage a week later in front of 50 strangers. She read a piece called "The Bench and the Boy." The room fell silent. When she finished, the applause was deafening. Several people approached her afterward, offering encouragement, compliments, and even invitations to join writing workshops. That night, she was offered temporary housing by a woman named Grace, who worked at the library. "You have too much potential to be sleeping on concrete," she said. Elena moved into the women's shelter and started volunteering there during the day. She began mentoring other women who had lost hope. She shared her story, taught them how to journal, and inspired them to find their own voices. David continued to visit, though less frequently. Not because he cared less, but because Elena was rising. She was flying. She had started her own blog, Brewed Words, inspired by the coffee that first warmed her hands and the conversation that first healed her soul. Her blog exploded in popularity. She wrote raw, unfiltered reflections about poverty, survival, kindness, and healing. Readers from around the world shared her pieces. A major publishing platform reached out, asking to compile her writings into a book. 1 year after the first coffee, Elena signed a book deal. The launch event was held at the same library where she had first read aloud. The hall was packed. Cameras clicked. Flowers lined the stage. A big banner read, "From the streets to the shelf, Elena Morales' story." David sat in the front row. When she walked up to the podium, elegantly dressed and glowing with quiet pride, she locked eyes with him. 1 year ago, she began, "I was invisible. I had nothing, not even hope. Then someone handed me a cup of coffee and smiled. That smile reminded me that I was still human. That I still mattered." She paused, voice thick with emotion. Kindness doesn't always come as a grand act. Sometimes, it's a hot drink, a listening ear, or a stranger who sees you when no one else does. The audience stood and applauded. Some cried. David did, too. After the event, Elena and David sat outside the same cafe. She brought him a coffee this time. "It's my turn now," she said with a grin. He laughed. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she replied. "Because without you, I might never have remembered who I was." David sipped the coffee. "All I did was sit down and smile. And that," she said, "changed everything." As people passed by them on the sidewalk, some glanced. Some smiled. A few recognized her now. But Elena no longer needed recognition. She had her words, her dignity, her fire, and most of all, her voice. What began as a simple morning gesture had turned into a story of revival. Not because of a charity or a campaign. But because one person chose to look, to see, and to care. Sometimes, that's all it takes. Just one cup of coffee. And one smile,